The nationwide redistricting fight has escalated since the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act. And tonight, the court's conservatives cleared the way for Alabama to move forward with a set of maps that would eliminate one of the two majority black districts in the state ahead of the midterms. The decision gives Republicans an opportunity to gain one additional House seat. Now, that came after Tennessee eliminated their only blue district, also ahead of this year's elections. Meanwhile, Democrats in Virginia appealed to the high court to save their redistricting effort after the state Supreme Court struck down a congressional map that could have helped them pick up 4 additional seats. Former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance, who spent 25 years as a federal prosecutor, is with us, and Holly McCall, editor-in-chief for the Tennessee Lookout, also joins us. It's great to have both of you with us. Joyce, I'll start with you. Explain for us what happened today and how it impacts Alabama, especially with a primary scheduled next week.
Well, Alabama has a case the Supreme Court decided 3 years ago that forced the legislature to rescind old discriminatory maps and use a new one that was drawn up by a 3-judge panel in Birmingham that created the second black opportunity district that you referred to. Now, Alabama gets to go back to its old discriminatory ways. And the real striking thing about this decision, Eamon, is it comes just a week ahead of Alabama's primary, which is held a week from tomorrow. So this is a court that has applied something called the Purcell principle to say no changes too close to an election. And in Alabama, when this decision that we're talking about, Milligan, was handed down 3 years ago, we actually went through an extra voting cycle in Alabama using the old discriminatory maps because the court said it was too close to the election, months away, 4 or 5 months away, to make changes under the Purcell principle. But now, just a week out from the election, it looks like we will have a major change.
How do they even justify that? Is there even a justification for that apparent contradiction or hypocrisy that a couple of years ago, 3 to 4 months, was too close to the election? Tonight, a week out, is acceptable?
Well, there's not one. It hasn't been addressed. There was a little bit of back and forth in the Calais opinion when that came up for a much more speedy implementation, avoiding the usual 32-day period before a Supreme Court case goes into effect. And there was a little bit of a back and forth between Justice Alito and Justice Jackson in which she referred to the Purcell principle. But it hasn't been addressed in Alabama. I suppose there could be a technical distinction about how the cases play out. But the reality is that Purcell, which has been applied to prevent black voters' wins from going into effect speedily, is now being ignored when the shoe is on the other foot.
Holly, you live and you report from Tennessee. You also ran in 2016 as a Democratic candidate for the state's House of Representatives. Walk me through what kind of impact these changes will have on your state.
Well, I think it's devastating to people in Memphis. Memphis is one of the largest, if not the largest, minority city in the country. This district was drawn, not the current 9th congressional district was drawn, though, not out of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, but rather it was drawn because the people in that district in Memphis have common interests. Now that district has been drawn. It's been cut into 3 parts. 2 of the new districts stretch from urban Memphis to Williamson County, which is one of the most affluent counties in the nation, to say nothing about being the home of U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn and the current governor of Tennessee, Governor Bill Lee.
Joyce, the NAACP sued Tennessee challenging the new maps there. Does it legally have a chance?
Well, it does. It has a good argument in large part because Tennessee law seems to prohibit these sorts of late-in-the-decade changes to voting maps. You know, what Holly is saying, I think, is the key to a successful challenge. There are rules around map making that involve keeping cohesive communities together and not arbitrarily splitting them up. And seeing this done particularly in Memphis, where Dr. King was assassinated, where many of the events that were key to the civil rights movement happens, almost feels as though the legislature is imposing a punishment on one of the most well-developed civil rights communities in the country.
It's such an important point, and I wanted to ask Holly about that. I mean, Tennessee, to Joyce's point, Tennessee and Alabama, they were central in the fight for civil rights in this country and that movement. They are now two of the first states to exploit or take advantage of the gutting of the Voting Rights Act. Your thoughts on that?
You know, I lived outside of the South for a long time before I moved back. And when I did live outside of the South, I would defend Tennessee against people who thought that this was a racist state. And certainly not everybody in Tennessee is racist. There are lots of good people here. But to witness what the legislature has done to carve up Memphis, which, as you and Joyce both mentioned, is so profound in the history of the civil rights movement. It's where Dr. King was martyred. One of his attorneys actually testified before the state legislature last week. And to see this happen and to listen to some of the lawmakers deny any knowledge of the race makeup, the racial makeup of Memphis, I think you have to say that we still have not gotten out of the Confederacy.
Yeah, so to ask you to follow up on that, I mean, do you believe this is motivated by the Republicans wanting to seize power, or is it motivated by racism to diminish the influence of black constituents in the state?
Well, two things can be true. And the Republicans in the Tennessee legislature they admitted, and I think it's very clear they wanted to take that one last district that Democrats still hold. But to hear them deny any knowledge of race and to just clearly obfuscate. And I think you also have to look at this decision with other issues that have occurred in Tennessee over the last few years. Just 3 years ago, this same state legislature, almost to a man, expelled two young, up-and-coming black lawmakers for taking a stand on the House floor about gun safety. This came in the wake of a horrid school shooting, and of course, it was the two young black lawmakers who were expelled and not the one white woman who's also been vocal about this with them. And so I think to witness the legislature in action and to know how some of the white lawmakers talk to black lawmakers, race is definitely a factor.